So Donald, we've heard from Tom a bit about the Bridge course developer's role, and you've been an advisor to several institutions and programs that are developing bridges,
Yes.
particularly in the STEM area. Could you talk to that a little bit about the business role?
Yes, I can, Michelle. Two key words, and we hear them all the time: collaboration and partnerships. Sincerely, you cannot create the type of program that Tom just outlined working in a vacuum. My days at IBM and working in other areas of education have demonstrated the importance of education, business, and community working together. I found early on that industry, as well as the levels of support to those industries, have a vested interest in providing a skilled workforce. What you will find, and you hear it all the time, we do not have enough skilled workers today. We can't get around that. The math is already given that. So what can we do to make that? Bridge programs provide that untapped access to those talent. And we have the wherewithal through our technology and through pedagogy and other areas that provide that educational uplift and community support to make that happen. It is critical. In today's environment, diversity we hear about all the time. You clearly need, that was part of my role, is how do you hit all of the areas of underrepresented groups? But most important around that diversity is diversity of thought. How do you provide problem solving in a very unique environment? So it's key to make sure that while we're doing these programs, we have enough infrastructure in place to make that happen. And I'll close with this point, Michelle, and that is the earlier that business is engaged with educators, the better it is. It sounds mundane, but so often we will put the, quote, cart before the horse. And it's a travesty when that happens, but we're learning and we're doing it much better in today's environment.
Great. So Tom, Donald spoke about the need to engage business and do it early on in the process, especially to keep up to date with the workforce needs, evaluate the progress that you're making in your programs, and then look for those areas that you might need some improvement. Can you tell me some ways that you've done that at Instituto?
Sure, and again, this is another essential feature, I think, of an effective bridge program. And I know we like to talk about a demand-driven approach in which we're carefully building relationships with those companies over time. It's not just early on in the program, that's essential, but it's also as we develop and continue and our students start to begin work at those companies to then evaluate what's their performance, to listen to the employer talk about how are our students doing, how can we improve the preparation that they have. So that's really essential. It's also essential for us to listen to the students, as an administrator, to go to the classroom and listen to what their experience is and conduct the evaluations, do the assessments, and make the changes that are needed over time. And a part of this has to do also with developing our performance metrics. What do we measure, both for ourselves and for our funders, and then how do we make the changes, based on the analysis that comes out of the data.
Great. That sounds good. Do you have something to add to that, maybe, Donald, about how programs can help to strengthen themselves by looking at their business from the business perspective?
It starts with leadership, having the big picture, understanding what the end goals are. So often, we create a roadmap to get somewhere, and we fail to look at the entrance and exit points along the way to get there. And with this collaboration, it is very easy to lose sight of where the technology and the technology trends are going. So we find ourselves with a workforce that's not quite ready. And by staying, very fervent in our communications and our commitment to it, from the unity of, or the trilogy of education, industry, and community, it all fits together very nicely, because one of the things I see all the time is companies have a large strategic plan that says this is where our products and services are going. And they sometimes will share and sometimes they won't. And the reasons are sound why they don't want to share. They have an intellectual property to protect. They don't want their competition to get too much knowledge about what's going on. And those things are important. However, you have to have the education community providing the upfront knowledge and the wherewithal, how do you say, that one could say, to make sure that the technology is there, to make sure that the skill set is in the end. Also, yeah, that's exactly right. And how do you prepare those students earlier? Because the K to 12 community is very important in that process. How do we get them acquainted with, our initiatives around STEM so that they're not afraid? Now, granted, we have a lot of our youth can do marvelous things with an iPad that's already been existing. But how do we create the next iteration of that in advance? So one of the things we would like to do is to make sure that we stay in sync with that.
Great.
Okay?
Well, thank you for sharing your perspectives on the role of business in developing and sustaining bridge programs. Do you have some specific recommendations for program managers in adult education programs for how they can engage with business?
I do. I think the first thing is to create a brand for yourself. And when I say create a brand for yourself, you have to be known. So often, industry is in their cycle and they're doing their thing, and in a manner of speaking, educators are doing their thing from an administration and an organization and an infrastructure perspective. However, that bridge program in this context, that bridge program manager have to be engaged in reading the tea leaves and where things are going, participating in business alliance meetings, participating in those meetings that really happen when the doors are closed, sort of on the golf course. To be really candid with you, there's a lot of activities that's shared in non-open forums. And you only get that when they trust you. When program managers can talk the same lingo that a business leader is talking, let's talk about the return on investment. Let's talk about shorter cycle time. Let's talk about how this is really going to impact my expense line. I got you. You got their attention. Right. So as long as program managers are very proactive, engaging, and relating in that partner collaboration-ish way, and I say ish from this perspective, because you don't get invited to the table until you have something to bring.
Yeah, I think that career or sector-focused approach is very important for our staff to be able to be familiar with manufacturing, to be able to speak the lingo, speak the language. Yes. as we're developing and maintaining the relationships with those companies, and also learn about new technology, what really, as you talked about, what are the new trends. And I think that's a reason why we really focus on building the technical foundations of learning. I mean, we know that when they go to the machine shop and they're working on this particular CNC machine, they're not likely to be getting a job on that particular machine. And in any case, that technology is always changing, and so they need that basic foundation in reading and writing and math and computer skills, so that they're ready to learn when they go to your company. They're ready to realize and change and flexible and be continuous learners over their lives. So.
Absolutely, and I would say very quickly is to be engaged with the innovation that's coming. Here's a quick example. Early in my career, I was sitting in a strategic review meeting, and the manager was showing that we would soon have memory devices that would fit in your shirt pocket. And this is in the early 80s. Saying, wow, how are you going to do that? And we got these large mainframes, and we got mid-range systems out there, but you're talking about storage devices that would fit in your shirt pocket. Obviously, those are memory sticks today. You have digital cameras that have those technologies. I saw these trends come to reality, as a matter of fact, and was very fortunate to work on the front end of some of those. Even when the manager said, we need this done, and I said, well, there's no examples of that being done. He said, well, that's the problem. You need to come up with that. So problem solve, those are the things we need to engage with.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. And Tom, I think we'll just summarize this with what was the single most important lesson you learned in developing an effective bridge program?
Sure. In terms of curriculum, I mean, just to learn that a curriculum should not be a fixed book that sits in somebody's bookshelf. It's got to be something that can change over time, and the instructors need to play a role in that, in adapting the curriculum to the changing needs as we listen to employers, as we listen to the students, et cetera, and to value those instructors. We had an evaluation done of our healthcare bridge program, and they said, your instructors are golden. they're golden. And so just to spend the time to develop that critical asset and recognize the value of that asset, I think is an important lesson. Overall, I think I've just learned to recognize the power of this whole process. It's amazing to watch students come in, sometimes with very low self-esteem, because they're low English, and to watch that change over time, to understand people really can learn through this process and advance at an accelerated rate, gain the job skills that they need, and then go on into employment. So I think just the vision that they get with a career pathway map, to understand that they're not just training, like in a traditional vocational program where it's working on one machine and that's the vision, I'm going to work on this machine. Right. They have a whole vision of how they can progress and advance within a career. So I think that's really powerful. It's what we've learned.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.